This is your Pain Game podcast, where we talk about the game of living in and with chronic pain and trauma, getting to the heart of how to heal. I am your host, Lyndsay Soprano. On this show, I plan on discussing with doctors, chronic pain patients, holistic practitioners, loved ones, and anybody that is interested in having their voice heard in the chronic pain and trauma world that we live in. The first weekend of May of this year, I finished my second 5K in my wheelchair. It was harder than the first one, and the first one was like 50% uphill, so I don't know what the deal was, but my God, it was so empowering again to push through the pain that I am always in, but it also pushing through the pain that I was feeling as I was getting really, really tired, because it is a lot of work to pull your body. As tiny as mine is, you know, my little 108-pounder here, 810, after I drink a bottle of wine, it's hard to do that. And like parts of the road were pulling to the left, so I was having to just one side of my body was hurting more than the other side. And it just is a reminder up to myself when I do things like this, the power of your mindset and the power that you have over focusing on something that you want to get to that end of that racetrack, that end of that destination, whatever it is that you're looking for and shooting for, and feeling empowered at the end of it. And I did. However, I did want to collapse and lay down on my yoga mat and stretch, like really stretch. But then I realized back in my head that I had an episode coming up that I was going to be recording. And his whole entire thing is about watch how you stretch or don't stretch. And we're going to talk about it like ad infinitum today. He is so amazing. And, I've missed the days of me standing strong on my legs, on my yoga mat, feeling the ground beneath me, walking in grass, being able to walk in sand. I miss those days. I am temporarily in this situation. I refuse to believe anything but that, right? And that's one of the reasons that we're here today and on every episode is that I wake up every day giving my pain purpose. And I know that my guest agrees as well on his side too. So thank you so much for being part of our pain journey together, my little VIPs. We'd be nothing without my listeners. So anyways, so here I am. And I'm ready to talk to my new pal who is going to talk about this whole stretching thing. And it sounds like whatever. It is so not whatever, guys. This is like insane. So let's talk about it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, Yogi Aaron. Thanks for being here, babe.
Thank you so much, Lyndsay.
You look so darling today. Not that you didn't look darling on our meet and greet. My gosh, I'm just like, I got the vapors for you.
Thank you.
Yogi Aaron is one of the most sought out yoga teachers today, and he's been trailblazing a new path in the world of yoga. And he's a little bit different from most yoga teachers, which we're going to get down into the nitty gritty about. And one of the things that you'll just love about him is his unorthodox perspectives on stretching and flexibility and how both of those can cause more harm than good. And of course, I love anything that's unorthodox, right? Just wait, guys. This is going to be fun. So his teachings aim to help as many people as possible live a pain-free life so they can realize yoga's true intentions, tapping into our limitless potential. Another wonderful guest here for you guys with a message of hope as well. He is the creator of the revolutionary approach to yoga. It's called Applied Yoga Anatomy and Muscle Activation, AYAMA, and has an online platform called the Yogi Club. He is also the host of the yoga podcast, Stop Stretching, and is the author of 2 books, The Autobiography of a Naked Yogi, which sounds very sexy, and also has a brand new book out called Stop Stretching, a new yogic approach to master your body and live pain-free. And he also is the co-owner of Blue Osa. It's a yoga retreat and spa in Costa Frickin' Rica, where he leads yoga teacher training immersions year round. I'm out of breath. Holy moly. And he doesn't look exhausted for 1 second over here. So I am rolling out the red carpet for you. I kind of want to start today with just starting with about how you started your journey in relation to chronic pain. And then we're going to take it from there.
Well, I thank you, by the way, for that great introduction. I was like, as you were talking, I was like, who is this person? I want to meet.
Right? It's a lot. It's a lot. And I was putting together your little profile on what I had to cut stuff out, guys. Otherwise, the intro would have been like 20 minutes, I swear. You're quite amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a philosophy that I want to live life as much as I possibly can. And I am able to stop. I'm not one of those people that feel anxious in my skin. Like a lot of people have a lot of anxious energy. I don't have that anxious energy. I just have FOMO and fear of missing out. And so I'm like always, trying to get in as much experience, do as much, shit as possible because it's time the TikTok.
That's right. We're not getting younger, guys.
We are yogis on the go. We've got to go.
Got your little go juice.
So my pain journey really started the moment I started yoga. And when I say yoga right now, I'm really talking about stretching. So I don't want to confuse it like as the practice, because my paradigm or my thought about yoga back then it was about stretching. It was about flexibility. And as I started to do more of it, that started to shift for me a bit. But really, I would say even right up until my pain journey sort of culminated about 5 years ago when I ended up in a surgeon's office, even up until that point, I think in the back of my mind, I still thought yoga was about stretching. So I got into yoga. I hurt myself. And I didn't put the two and two together. Like I didn't realize like, oh, maybe I'm actually doing something not good for my body. And what happened is my back seized up on me. I bent over to pick something up. At 18, it seized up. And kind of an interesting thing that happened simultaneously is I started developing like an ego around I am a person with a bad back. And so that became my sort of persona, gratis or whatever they call it. And then I would go into yoga classes and I would say to teachers like, oh, I have I've developed back issues. I have to make adjustments in certain poses. And over time, the problem just got worse and worse. Like you think you're getting better. And then all of a sudden, again, you just bend over and pick something up, or you do something like just like standing over the bathroom sink, brushing your teeth. And I remember there was a few times when I had to like brace myself to like, because I was like, is my back going to go out? Like, I'm just not sure. And then other things started happening as well. Like my knees just really started crapping out. One of the worst things that happened to me was that I started developing this searing neck pain that was sort of like right at the top of my scapula and then would shoot pain down my arm. And I went to several quote unquote healers. Nobody, told me what to do. And when I say healers, I'm talking about people in the woo-woo sciences. And I didn't really ever go to a doctor to find out what was going on, but I did go to someone who I sort of knew, and he did good neck work, but I didn't realize how educated he was. And as soon as he saw me, he said, this is exactly what's going on with your neck. This is exactly what we need to do with it. And he also did something with me, which was called muscle activation technique. And that was sort of the beginning of me getting introduced to the power of what happens when you get your muscles working properly. So, then Eric would give me some homework, some things to do. Of course, I never did it. I went back and I stretched because that's what I thought healed things. And then, like I said, I kind of culminated when I ended up in a surgeon's office, an orthopedic surgeon who wanted to do a spinal fusion on my lower back.
Of course he did.
Of course, because that's what you do.
What do surgeons do? They do surgery.
So, yes, he wanted to cut in, but he was saying there's a very good chance because if this pain doesn't get better, this is exactly what's going on in your back, and this is not good. And so we're going to just see. So they ended up doing a cortisone shot, which helped because my back was in such an inflammatory process from all the stretching I was doing, which was making it worse. And then I decided to get into muscle activation technique. And that was kind of like a turning point for me where I was like, something else has to be the answer. Because what I know about the human body is not correct because it's not working for me. And if it's not working for me, it's probably not working for a lot of other people. And then, so that's kind of it in a nutshell, my pain journey.
Your little nut pain journey. Yeah. And I've read, and we talked about this before, the muscle activation technique. And it's really interesting. I'd like you to talk about it a bit. Obviously, we're going to. But basically, when you go in with whoever's working on your body, whoever is the certified therapist or whatever, goes in and finds weakles. Yes, that is weak muscles.
I love it.
Finds weakles. And then kind of like turns them on, like gives them fire again. Is that a good, like, quick nutshell of what that is?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, don't confuse Kegels with Weekles.
I might start doing my Kegels right now.
Well, I was going to say I'm doing mine. I don't see why
love you right now. I don't know. There's all kinds of random things going on with our bodies these days. Oh my God. Okay, so Weekles is not Kegels, and it's also not Weekles.
Yeah, so you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like an MAT therapist, well, there's kind of two routes that they can go, but the basic one is Greg Roskopf, who's the creator of muscle activation technique, has created a way for people for therapists to quickly identify muscle weakness. Like, where is their weakness? Where is their asymmetrical imbalance in the body? And as an MAT therapist, now I'm in my lane. I go in, I find the weakness. And then, so like if, for example, if I find that the weakness is hip flexors, right side, I go in and I turn on all those hip flexors. And then you might say, well, Aaron, I mean, aren't muscles always turned on? And that's the problem, is that due to stress, trauma, and overuse, these muscles will shut down. And when I say shut down, you can imagine like a telephone line between the brain or the central nervous system and the muscles. And that telephone line becomes a little bit frayed at the edges. Like, especially if you travel around Costa Rica, you look up and go, those telephone lines don't look healthy. And so the telephone has to come and change them to improve communication systems, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what happens. Me as an MAT therapist, I get the muscles talking to the brain again, basically, so that when the brain senses instability, it now has the communication pathway corrected so it can tell those muscles to start working, to tell those muscles to contract and contract on demand. I would say, and I'm not being glib or hyperbolic, I'm actually being very serious, but in my estimation, most people are walking around with 50% muscular capacity, meaning that most people walking around are walking around with 50% of their muscles not contracting and contracting on demand properly, which is why the number of people who are living with pain in their body is so high. And I think, of course, there's a lot of exacerbating issues like, sitting a lot, eating unhealthy. There's a lot of exacerbating issues, but the fact is that most people are walking around with debilitated neuromuscular systems.
Well, you're looking at one, and I 50% sounds high for me right now, honestly, because yes, I sit a lot. I used to be crazy active. I was hiker, biker, skier, jumper, rower, blah blah blah, whatever I could do, I would do, and extreme sports, fun sports, easy sports, yoga, all of it, and so now I'm in this place where I sit far more than I used to, but. A lot of my friends and my sweetie and my family members and such are always like, oh, no, don't get up. I'll get it for you. And I'm like, no, I got to get up and I got to move right now. I've got to move or else I'm going to lose them, move them or lose them, baby. Yeah. And I've atrophied so much. And I also like my marathon pictures came in and not my marathon, my 5K pictures came in from the OC marathon that we did here. And just the pictures of my legs in my wheelchair. I'm just like, what the hell? They're so atrophied from slowly but surely, not only me when I do walk, which is a lot. I walk a lot. So but I just can't go long distances, right? So, but when I'm walking on the outside of my feet now, instead of like pronating forward and walking like through the balls of my feet, because the balls of my feet, the bones hurt so bad. It hurts to put, like, I can't walk bare feet. That's just absolutely never going to happen in the next, span of time. But I can tell that things are kind of withering away. I almost feel like I am walking on my bones and that I just don't have as much plumpness to my body. I don't have the fat in my body that I used to. All of these things like you were talking about. There's all these other things that can be involved, but hands down, my muscles are weak. And the places that are getting strong aren't in the right places because they're making up for these things that I'm faking.
Compensating.
That's exactly right. I am totally overcompensating. So my knees feel thrashed, especially my right one. And when you were talking about balance and stability and all of that, I feel like I don't want to use a cane. I don't want to use a cane when I'm standing like a human. But I'm like getting nervous now because every now and again, my right knee just goes whoop and just goes out on me, or my ankle rolls or whatever. It's really, really sad. But you gave me so much hope in talking about this MAT because to me, it's like almost like I've got little helpers that are going to be activated that are going to help like strengthen my muscles. And they're like with a pulley system or something. Like I've got a visual of like what I want it to like. These little functioning people helping me in my legs and in my arms and stuff. My arms are much better than they were because I've been working on my wheelchair stuff.
Sure.
My upper body's rocking. My lower body is like, what the hell?
One of the things about when we get the muscular system working properly, so what is causing a lot of pain in most people's bodies, and I'm talking physical pain, obviously, and so much of pain is directed or directly related to inflammation. There's inflammation, and that was why I ended up in the surgeon's office because I had an inflammatory response in my lower back. So, but what we know, or what I've experienced directly, I'm not just saying this by rote, but I've actually experienced it and help other people to experience it, is when we get the muscular system working, the body then feels stable, and then the inflammatory system immediately goes, dissipates. And then other communication pathways start to improve. So it's kind of amazing. That's why I was like saying to you when we initially talked, like if you could get into an MAT therapist, I think it would be a game changer. And I would be so fascinated to see what would happen, because I think you're an exceptional, story. And that I really believe it would, because I've gone in to see Eric. Eric is my guy, and he's the guy in LA that I was telling you about.
I know. I came upon your email while I was prepping for this. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. I have his contact information. I thought somewhere along the line I forgot to get it from you. So that was my bad.
But the thing about Eric is I would go in with my lower back seized up. Normally that would take me a few weeks to heal. I would go in to see Eric with my neck like tight as a rock. And then within an hour and a half, he could completely change all of that. So if I walked into his office like 8 out of 10 in pain, I would leave like 1 or 2 maybe out of
Whoa.
pain. And
God, I haven't felt a 1 or a 2 in a long time.
And that was what happened when I ended up in the surgeon's office. I called Eric after and I said, I think I should learn MAT. And he goes, I think that would be a fantastic idea because it would give you more information. And Eric has done like all kinds of different modalities. He's a chiropractor, a welfer, deep tissue expert. Out of all the modalities and spending, 5 years in chiropractic school, he says MAT is the one thing that works the best out of all of them. So
it's amazing.
It is.
So
yeah.
from within your applied yoga in your AYAMA, applied, I had to practice it like 17 times before. AYAMA. Now I won't shut up about it. But when you created this yoga approach, you did this applied yoga anatomy plus this MAT part of that. What makes that approach so incredibly unique? And where does this don't stretch fall into this conversation? Because that is how we open, and that is so, because I'm just like on pins and needles trying to figure out, because we all think, oh, just go stretch your hammies. I always say that to my sweetie, don't forget to stretch your hammies. And I'm like, great, I've been telling him to do the wrong thing the whole time. Not that he listened to me anyway.
Well, hopefully he didn't in this particular case.
I guarantee he didn't.
So first of all, when I got into MAT, it's a very specific therapeutic style. And what I gradually wanted to do was translate it into yoga. And so what I do in my yoga classes in AYAMA, it's not MAT. Like MAT is a very specific lane, and I'm not certified to teach people that as well. And it's also more of a therapeutic one-on-one approach, which is not applicable for a yoga class of like 20, 30, 40, 50 people. So then I was like, okay, well, how do I fit this into a class? And that has been sort of the creative process between, when I got into it to me writing the book, was understanding like, where do we fit this in? And what I realized first and foremost is how many yoga teachers just do not understand the body. They say a lot of very fantastic kind of like things which don't make any sense. And like one of them, which is my biggest pet peeve these days, is opening the hips. Like you always see workshops.
Oh my God, everywhere.
Open your hips. And if you think about that biomechanically, it doesn't make sense. Like if your hips are open, they're dislocated. And I don't think we want to walk around in life with dislocated hips. So why are we telling people to open their hips? And then what's wrong with having closed hips? I would rather have closed hips because then my hips are stable and all the muscles are working and holding my hips in place. But anyways, aside from that, I wanted to start like challenging some of these ideas. So that's how the AYAMA came in. There's kind of two parts to AYAMA: the applied yoga anatomy, which is like yoga teachers are so deficient in basic anatomy. And then I also wanted to empower like the regular person like you to be able to understand the body. Like if you understood basic functions, you go, oh, that's where I'm weak. I need to fix that, or I need to get stronger there. Like my hip flexors, oh, who know that they're supporting my spine? Okay, so I need to get my hip flexors strong. So there's just little things like that. And then the muscle activation, of course, is a big part of it, because the opposite of muscle activation is stretching. And so stretching is one of the biggest culprits to disrupting that communication system between the brain and the muscle. I always say, remember how I was using that telephone line analogy before? Well, stretching is like taking a pair of gardening shears, big gardening shears, and just chopping in half that telephone line. It's like you're in Costa Rica and the bandits come and steal the fiber optic cables.
The bandit.
Literally, they could literally come in with their gardening shears and cut it. And then they do. I'm not making that up.
And I have this picture in my head of the hamburger. Do you remember that? For the McDonald's commercials in the black and white striped shirts and the little. That's literally what visual came into my head.
I know you haven't heard that word bandits in a while, have you?
So it's like cutting your basic, like almost cutting that communication off, not cutting your muscle per se, but it's really the connection between our central nervous system and our brain and our muscles. Is that how I understand that? I'm just trying to dumb it down.
And just for anybody who's a little bit more scientific, basically what it does is it starts to desensitize the intrafusal muscle fibers. So the intrafusal muscle fibers are basically sensing when they need to lengthen and shorten. They start to send messages to the central nervous system in the form of gamma motor neurons. So what stretching does, to make a long story short, is it desensitizes those intrafusal muscle fibers so they no longer work and do their job properly. Now, do they start to become sensitive again? It depends. With someone like you, who is a little bit more unique, you have more stress, you have more trauma in your body, we can almost guarantee there's more inflammation. So there's a lot of things that are breaking your system down. We need to start building your system up. And I want to be very specific at a neuromuscular level. So at a neuromuscular level, we're improving that communication system. And what we often find is that once that communication system's improved, we start to get better. When we stretch, it does the opposite. It debilitates it. So if you get a young person like, an Olympic athlete at the age of 16, 18 years old, probably they can handle the stress of stretching because they can stretch and then they can go back out. Although they do get harmed a lot, because we can see that, because over time they have to wear ACE bandages, they have to wear arches, they have to wear back braces, they're constantly icing themselves the more they get older. So we can actually see visually, like as bystanders, we can see them getting debilitated, and then they end up having to quit the sport or get surgery.
Yeah, geez. Well, it's just so interesting because, before the 5K, for example, I was like, God, I didn't even stretch my arms or open up my chest or do anything to kind of get me prepped for all of that.
Yeah.
So when this shift has to happen within us in regards to what stretching actually is and what part of it is bad. And are you going to say every single thing about it is bad?
Well, I think that, there's a lot of people that get bent out of shape because then they're like, well, there's different kinds of stretching.
Sure.
So I kind of lump all stretching almost into a category. There is one kind of stretching, but that's actually good, and it's called dynamic stretching. But a lot of people don't really understand the mechanics of that. I prefer to say dynamic movement. So instead of like you, for example, stretching your arms, and in some of the terms, things might get confused because if I say bring your arms up to the sky and then kind of don't move your spine, but just bring the arms back, are you stretching the shoulders? Are you stretching the chest? Or are you activating the back muscles? So it's kind of like terms kind of get a little wonky here because so many people, if they feel like opening, then they kind of immediately assume that stretching. But if the opposite muscle is actually engaging, that's dynamic movement.
Oh, that's a very good way of explaining that. Thank you.
So there's a wall beside me. You can see it, but your listeners can't. If I bring my hand up to the wall and then push away from it, now I'm passively stretching tissue in my chest. But if I bring my arms back, yes, I am creating a bit of a stretch in the front chest. But what I'm really doing is activating my trapezius muscles, which is going to your point about preparing for your race, being, using your upper body so much, you would want to do things to start activating all of those muscles in your upper body as much as possible.
Okay, that was really good. That was really good because for me, I'm super visual anyway. But and because people can't see us, I do like that because like all I wanted to do was just like lay open on my ball, on my exercise ball, and just lay there and open up. And now I'm going, oh God, don't do it. I knew it. I knew you were going to say it.
Don't do that.
But that sounds like it's going to feel so good. So why does that feel good when it's actually doing us harm? Because that's an interesting question.
Yeah, but before I answer your question, I want to really emphasize a point which needs to be clarified. And you said something very poignant, which is it feels good.
Yeah.
And so, doing a line of Coke feels good.
Oh God, the good old days.
Although I just for the record, I do not know because I have a very addictive personality. I've stayed away from that stuff.
That's why Lyndsay had to stop doing that.
If I do one line, I know I won't stop. But
well, and that's also the problem with the pain and opiate community too. Like I won't take pain pills because I know my personality type for sure.
Yeah, I mean, those pain pills, I mean, is it good or bad? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Another thing I wanted just to kind of add is drinking a bottle of wine feels good. I love wine. But if I drink a bottle next morning, I feel like crap. So just because something feels good doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for you. And in the words of my sister Karina, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Well said.
So, good.
Damn it.
But I'm saying that because stretching does feel good, even if it's painful in the moment. Like afterwards, there is a parasympathetic release. Your body goes into rest and digest. You do feel peaceful because you have started to tap into that part of your nervous system that is clenching. But in terms of stretching itself, it just leaves you more debilitated at the end. And again, you're just cutting off those neurocommunications. And why you say, well, Yogi Aaron, like, why is that important? Well, if you're going to leave the yoga class, and this literally has happened to me a few times, I go home, feel good. I'm like, in it. I start doing stuff in my kitchen. I go take a shower. I jump in the shower and I reach up and grab the shampoo bottle. And this has literally happened to me. I'm not being glib. And I grab the shampoo bottle. My whole back seizes up.
Ugh.
Because my body was left in a compromised state. Like my muscles were not contracting properly. So when I reached up to grab the shampoo bottle, which was very heavy, by the way, and so my brain is saying to the muscles, contract, but none of the muscles were. So my shoulder would go through a range of motion that wasn't being supported by muscles. So muscles have two jobs. Basically, they have more than that, I know, but they basically have two big jobs. One is to move bones. So you think about like you're in your wheelchair and you're turning the wheels and you've got to use your shoulders can you imagine what would happen? Like if you're only going at 50% capacity with the amount of muscles that are being used, maybe your upper traps aren't firing properly. So then another muscle has to start compensating. But what if that muscle's not working? Then another muscle has to compensate. And so you see this a lot with athletes who have to use their shoulders. And one of the biggest things that athletes have to deal with is rotator cuff tears. Well, I can tell you that a lot of that rotator cuff stuff is happening because the major muscles are not working to begin with. And so the rotator cuff muscles are being way overused and having to compensate for managing a lot of range of motion that they're not supposed to be dealing with.
That's so interesting. Well, this whole thing is just kind of mind-boggling to me, honestly, because
it is mind-boggling.
It is. It's like flexibility and stretching madness in my mind right now, because we've always been taught to stretch. We've always been taught these things. And I've spoken to so many people that are about stretching. And so I'm like, I'm going to be reaching out to a couple of them and being like, you guys are going to have to listen to this episode and I want to report back because obviously we all have our viewpoints and perspectives and things like of yours and I's particularly. We're more in the unorthodox group of people, but it is based on science. It's not based on you just being like, you know what, guys, I think I'm just going to throw this out there and we'll just see how it works out for you.
I want to just kind of comment on that because, sometimes, especially in the conversation, we get into my truth. And I don't believe in my truth, your truth. I just believe there's just facts. And what I do as a yogi, and this is the kind of interesting thing for yoga, it's really about what is reality. Like, let's get to what is reality. One of the number one, this is a side conversation, but one of the practices in yoga is just watching a flame, like staring at a flame. And the question is, do you really see the flame? And so that's for us, like it's always about getting to the source. But coming back to stretching, I can test you and I can test your force output. Like if I get your muscle strong before I stretch you, and then I come and stretch you, there's going to be like a huge difference. And you will feel as if when you stretch, you will feel as if like someone just turned the light out in your office, in your muscles, because that proprioception, that connection between the brain and the muscles, it's gone. It's like literally like turning off a light switch.
That's
and the
so
brain
crazy.
Just doesn't know. So when we talk about science, like we can actually test it and we can test force outputs of muscles and see like what happens to a muscle when we stretch it. And in the end, there has been a lot of studies done, by like Lenox Hill Hospital out of New York found that when athletes stretched for 30 minutes afterwards, their muscles were not working properly. 30 minutes.
Wow.
And then the comment was, that's not how you want to begin like your sports, whatever you're doing with your sports. If it's going for a run or something, you need all of those muscles working. You don't want them debilitated.
So I'm sitting there at the 5K and I'm watching 75,000 people pulling their knees back and their ankles back, stretching their quads and stretching their calves and doing the whole thing. And all of them are hurting themselves. Wow. Wow. That's nuts, man.
I mean, if you look at how many runners deal with shin splints, deal with ankle issues, deal with knees, how many of those people stretching had knee braces? How many of them have hip problems? How many of them have lower back issues? And so many of them are dealing with issues. Stretching just makes it worse and they just don't know it.
God, I'm flabbergasted. It's literally just having having this shift of 45 years of my life of hearing.
Can I offer you a different perspective? And if what I've said to Pete, your listeners, hasn't registered, then go back to the function. So I said muscles move bones and then muscles stabilize the joints. And how do they do that? A muscle does that. Muscle moves bones and a muscle stabilizes joints by shortening. They have to contract. Contract means to shorten. And so what is stretching doing? Well, stretching is pulling it longer. And so why would we want to encourage a muscle to become longer when its function is actually to shorten? So that's another perspective.
Oh, you're so good at this. You're so good because it's a hard one to explain. I was like trying to wrap my noodle around it before we were talking today. And that is such a good visual about the muscles getting longer because I can like see that almost like melted cheese, like pulling away from our bones and our joints and actually destabilizing us for our movement. That is insane. Well, there's a lot of people that I know that are going to be happy with this news. And one of them is my sweetie. He's like, yes.
When you passively move people, all those stretch lab people are doing is destroying people's sense of stability because they're opening up a lot of range of motion. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say not even a lot of range of motion, an extreme amount of range of motion that is going to leave people more vulnerable and open to injuries in their regular life. And so it may feel good, but it's not serving people, and it's going to make any kind of existing problems even worsened. And that's exactly what happened to me. Is like I never dealt with the real causes of my body's tightness. I just tried to slap a Band-Aid on it and try to stretch it out, but that didn't work.
This stuff is so important. And even just hearing the word pain-free or eliminate pain, I mean, those are words that, especially in the chronic pain community, that's all we want to hear is pain-free, pain-free, pain-free. Well, okay, but they always say the thing, no pain, no gain, right? Well, God.
Yeah, that whole pain, no gain, that needs to, like pain from an MAT and AYAMA perspective is like the check engine light of the body coming on and saying, something is wrong and we need to address it. And so pain, again, is an inflammatory response. And the thing is that we have to ask the question, well, why is there inflammation there? Well, something is not stable. And so we need to address the instability. And that's why, like, when I would go into yoga classes and tell teachers, like, I have back problems, not one of them ever said to me, we need to get your back stronger. Like, we need to get it stronger. And you need to stop stretching. You need to start activating your glutes and activating your lower back. And not one yoga teacher ever said that. And all of those kind of people at these stretch labs, I guarantee you not one of them is properly educated on how to move people's bodies properly. And even more like the biomechanics. Like if you talk to them about hip flexors or back extensors, like they're probably just like, what? Yeah, back extensors. Sure. Let's open those backs up,
Let's open it all up.
Let's just open it all up, baby.
In some cases, that's a good thing. But in this case, it is not. Oh my God. I want to keep talking to you, but we're running out of time. So what can we leave our listeners with before we jam out of here?
Well, first of all, go to Amazon, search Stop Stretching, get my book.
Yes.
Because it's just such a great education for people to have. And it's told in a fun way. And there's tons of cute like drawings. I had an artist do all these drawings of my dog. So, but the second thing is go to my website. I have some freebies there. I have lots of freebies actually. And one of them is which I think you're going to put in your show notes, the 7 days to becoming pain-free.
I will.
And it's basically it's a freebie. It just starts to educate people. Like I was just talking about trunk extensors. Most people don't know what their trunk extensors are. So let's learn a little bit about them and what is the number one muscle that is in our trunk, of our trunk extensors that we need to get activated so that way we can start to live a more pain-free life.
Well, I love it because I think learning and educating ourselves, and that's one of the reasons that we're here, is to do just that, is to educate not only your host here, but all of the listeners, because I learned something, if not 25,000 things, every episode that I do with you people, because you guys are just amazing. And I find myself, in the morning when I know I've got the show to do and I'm very passionate about what I do, not unlike yourself, it is so important that we're getting out this information and that I am presenting it in the most eloquent and fun and, disparaging and, vulnerable way that I possibly can. But it's so nice to meet people like you and the spirit that you brought to this today. I really appreciate it. And it's been fun listening to your podcast and reading about you and watching you on social. So all of his social stuff will be in show notes and as well as in social. Thank you so much again for spending time with us today. Yogi Aaron, I appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Lyndsay, for having me here.
You are exclusively invited to share this Don't Ever Stretch Again VIP pain journey together. Let's get to the heart of how to heal with you by my side. Do you know anyone that is living in and with chronic pain? If you do, send them our way here to the Pain Game Podcast. I would love to connect with them and hear their heartfelt stories of strength and wisdom and utter sheer awesomeness. And reviews. Stop what you're doing and hop on Spotify and Apple and give the show a review or two. I would love to have my community of listeners help drive traffic to the show so that we can continue to help others on their journeys through trauma and pain together. Please follow the Pain Game Podcast wherever you digest your podcast content. We will be there. Visit us at thepaingamepodcast.com and follow us on all the socials. Thanks for listening, my little VIPs. Catch you on the other side.